Semonani, good evening, Dumelang, and welcome to the Thursday edition of the Private Property Podcast. I'm your host, Zama Kumalo. We're on episode 127 of the Private Property Podcast, and it's the Thursday edition. This evening, we're talking about something that I know a lot of us probably don't think about too much, but it's such an important thing to always bear in mind, especially as, we're moving forward, we're seeing the effects of, or certainly seeing the value of doing this particular thing or these particular things. And I'm sure you're wondering what exactly that is. But before I get to those juicy parts, we are, of course, welcoming our viewers from Facebook, from YouTube, from Twitter, as well as Instagram. We always love, getting the love from you. So do send us those green hearts down here below. And of course, keep interacting with us. I did promise you that we are cooking up a good giveaway for the social media platform that interacts the most. We're still cooking up how we're going to, do that particular giveaway. So I do look forward to seeing a lot of the familiar faces, also roping in a lot of the new faces, especially our viewers on Instagram. So do stay tuned for those details that we'll be sharing in the coming episodes. And this evening, what we're talking about is if you're looking to, build a home, or certainly if you're looking at the home building process, here are 4 practical ways that you can build greener. And we're also going to explore beyond building, because the reality of it is, in as much as there are people who are going to be building from scratch, a lot of us already have homes or perhaps apartments. So how can we make our homes as green as possible, even though they're already built? So really understanding what it even means to go green. I know sometimes that tends to be the buzzword, we must be green, we must go green, we must be eco-friendly. But what exactly do we mean when we say going green, especially when it comes to our properties, whether you're building from scratch or, of course, as I mentioned, you're already living in a property that's already built up. We're going to certainly be understanding that a little bit better this evening. And I'm joined by Alison Groves, who's the Regional Director at WSP. Alison, thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Good evening. Lovely to be here.
Alison, I think before you even look at tips and tricks, what you can do to different parts of the home and those kinds of things, what exactly do we mean when we say we're going green, especially when it comes to the built environment? It is quite a big thing right now. We're seeing it even in the commercial buildings, but certainly if we kind of scale it down to, residential homes, what exactly do we mean when we talk about that?
Wow, that's a big topic. Green is far expanding. You could look at just simply the energy and water, which is the usual suspects, shall we say. They're the easy to manage green items. And everybody goes, oh, yes, I want to go green. And they think sun, solar energy. But actually, green is so much more. It's a behavioral change. It's a mindset change. It's finding the little things you can do slightly differently. So, when people ask me, what did you do to go green? I said, go slowly, because being green is a behavioral change, a shift, and it's a change in the way you think about what you do. So going green in your home is not necessarily just the physicality of changing light bulbs, but it's also maybe how do you clean your house? How do you consider your waste? What products do you buy? So it's a very, very large topic. And the good thing about that is it doesn't exclude anybody from starting the journey.
And I think, before we even look at where do you start, because I like the fact that you're saying, go slowly, because you also understand that the home, there can be so many different things that you can sort of transform and try to be more eco-friendly and sort of use alternative, products. So before we even look at that, perhaps, and this question I'm even asking maybe for people who don't quite know the benefits of going green or aren't necessarily convinced, because I know there are quite a lot of people. I know it took me a little bit, but luckily I was very young, because there was certainly a time when we were growing up and it was all about recycle, going green. And a part of me was just like, oh my God, the greenies are at it. But then you actually realize that, no, this is actually a thing, environmental awareness is actually a very important part of something that all of us essentially have to know. And it's there in almost every aspect of our lives. So not just in how your home can be green. So even in choosing, where, let's say the restaurants where you go to, how do they, dispose of the excess food? So those kinds of things. So I think there are different ways that we can be more environmentally aware of our impact. And that's why I say this question is for perhaps the skeptics. So not you and I.
So why go green?
Yes. So why go green?
Why go green? Well, there's a ton of reasons why you can go green. First of all, we can do the obvious ones. Going green, you can actually save money. The basic principle of green is actually using less. And if you are using less, you're maybe spending less. Simple things as using less water. Yes, there's not a very big correlation between the cost of water and using less water, but using less water is good for the environment. And if there is more water available, you can have expanded development. You can have factories because they can survive on the water. We are entering into a time of great climate change. And I think it would be, silly that people haven't noticed how things have changed. Our summers are really very much hotter. The rainfalls are intense, but far apart. And this is going to be our new norm. So if thinking about green, we also need to think about how we as humans live in our environment. What are the things to do to make our environment more efficient, but also more comfortable, because it is going to get more uncomfortable as time goes on. So going green is also looking at comfort and the human in the space. So it's not just simply energy and water. Looking at things like materials. Materials are, we refer to the embodied carbon in materials. So the energy that it takes to make a material. And so much in our life is disposable. And that carbon energy, it's gone into the atmosphere. It has an effect on the atmosphere, but ultimately it gets disposed in a landfill. How can we find ways of making those waste products resources, something that are valuable? And it's finding ways to go into the circular economy. It's just about making better choices. That's really all it is.
And I certainly want to hear from our viewers at home. And Alison has actually put it so in such a great way that it is about making greater choices. So if you're watching us at home, how would you say you've gone green? And it doesn't have to be a big thing like overturning your whole household, but what have been some of the small changes that you've already started to make in order for you to go green? And this probably then just leads me to my question, Alison, because you were saying earlier that this is something that you can start quite slowly, so you don't need to feel the pressure of having to do a complete overhaul of your, of your property or of your house. So where can people start? Because they're probably now listening and thinking, look, I certainly have noticed, as you're saying, some of the environmental changes, and they want to certainly in their homes start making some of those changes, because hopefully we're going to be here in the next 40 years, and you'd like to believe that may look even longer. I'd like to hear 50 more. So where can people start, Alison?
Well, I would suggest starting with the things that are easy and have big impact. Now, I think a lot of people have heard that the benefits of changing light bulbs, but maybe you don't actually understand the value because you haven't done the sums. So maybe one day do an exercise around your house, go around and count the number of light bulbs and tally up the watts of each light bulb. So if you've got an incandescent light, it's probably 100 watts.
Yeah.
If you've got a CFL light, it's probably about 18. But if you've got an LED light, it could be between 7 and 10, depending on how many lumens it gives. Lumens are the brightness of the light. And I think the way we shop for lights now is just changed. We don't look at how much energy it consumes. We need to know how much light it puts out. So that becomes the defining factor. And replacing LEDs or any old lights for LEDs is actually a very inexpensive and measurable benefit to your house. So if that's the first thing you do, you can make a decision to only buy LEDs and replace your lights as they fail, or you can be radical and change all of them in one day. These are small changes that you can do, which are incremental, but it's a considered decision to say, this is where I'm going. So that's first.
Yeah, so that certainly is the first thing. And, Alison, surprisingly, I didn't, get to terms with understanding even like the amount of money you save when it comes to LED lights until I was a trustee in one of the buildings where I invest in, and we had to change our lights because we actually saw when we looked, we used to buy lights quite regularly, especially the lights that are in the common areas. So they're on quite often. The building, the passageway doesn't get a lot of sunshine. So you actually have to have those lights on. And so your normal lights essentially run out faster than the LED lights. And the LED lights tend to last longer. So we ended up replacing, as the light bulbs essentially go out, we put in LED lights. I think the price was a little bit higher, but essentially we were saving because when we looked at the frequency with which we were buying the older lights, it was quite a lot. So I think that's certainly one way to slowly think about it when you actually count the rands and cents. So even if you're not thinking, oh, I'm saving the planet or I'm having some kind of like environmental impact, look at how it's financially impacting you.
But if you look at that, you are saving the planet because you're using less, and LEDs aren't as hazardous to dispose of as CFL lights. So there's already an environmental benefit of that. But, LEDs are the smallest part of a green home. So one of my pet favorites is water. Water is one of the most precious resources we have, and without it, we don't live. That's the bottom line. So it's incumbent on all of us to look at ways of still being comfortable, but reducing our absolute needs. So water use, the simplest thing is changing your the flow restrictor in your hand basin taps and reducing your showers. So I did a little quick sum last night, and I said normal shower with no flow restrictor can be anything from 16 to 22 liters, depending a minute. So a 5-minute shower could be up to 120 liters, okay? If you reduce your shower to a moderately reduced shower, a 9 liter per minute, you reduce your 5-minute shower to 45 liters. That's a substantial saving.
Yeah.
Even better shower heads out there, which are 6 liters. And to be honest, I've got them all in my house, and I've never had any comments from my guests saying, oh my word, your shower is poor. And I do encourage all my clients to put in these showers, and they are becoming the new norm. And it's wonderful to see, because you're still getting bathed, you're still having the hot shower experience, but you're using much less water.
Alison, I'm going to go for a quick break, and when we come back, I certainly want to hear from viewers at home. If you've already started going green, what have been some of the small changes that you've made in your home or the properties that you own? Because you understand the importance of not just going green, but also just being environmentally aware when it comes to the decisions that we make in our various properties. Certainly want to hear from you, and we'll also then look at how do we build greener, because I think that is probably something that some people who haven't probably you've bought the land and now you want to build from scratch and build well from scratch, as opposed to having to make those small changes later on. So we certainly do want to hear from you at home around what have been some of those small changes that you've already started making. I mean, we're speaking about LED lights. I wasn't aware about the shower. I mean, it was Alison was talking about the shower. I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I don't typically take long showers, but when I do, they can be quite long. So I feel now I also just need to be fundamentally aware of something like that. We're going to go for a quick break, and we'll be back just after this. Welcome back to the Private Property Podcast. I'm your host, Zama Kumalo. This evening, I'm joined by Alison Groves, who's the Regional Director at WSP. We're talking about going green. Going green, whether you are starting a building, project, or certainly in our homes. What are the different ways that you're already starting to go green in your, respective properties? Perhaps it can be your primary residence or even the various properties that are in your property portfolio. Alison has already shared around why it's so important. I think it's a bit of a no-brainer because we're all seeing the environmental effects that we are currently going through. Sammy, I see your comment there saying interesting topic. I love it when the ringleader comments because he's always, of course, gathering the troops, as I like saying there on Facebook. And of course, we also looked at where to start. So you don't have to almost do a complete overhaul of your house, and we'll be getting more of those tips from Alison. Zada Manuel was our guest last evening, saying Zama is such a great host. Thank you so much there, Zada. Of course, we had her yesterday, and she's from the ABSA Home Loans team when we were talking about first-time home buying. If you did miss that episode, then do go back to listen to it. It was such a great episode that I think a lot of people who are first-time home buyers certainly needed to get to know about, especially when it comes to their first-time home loan application process, again, the various tools that are available from ABSA Home Loans. Now, Alison, you've certainly shared around, some of the basic ways that we can start. I see one of our viewers on Facebook actually saying, Umatha Shingange, hi to Umatha, is also one of the ringleaders, saying, Mathas, she says she started with a solar geyser LED light bulbs. We need to preserve our planet for the next generations. I'm learning from this and will implement more of these saving measures. So shower, LED, certainly a very good start. Where else are we able to, make some of those changes in our homes, Alison?
Well, if you're still looking at what are the easy fixes, insulation is a very good one. Even if you just start with your electric geyser and insulate that, I think it's about 400 Rand for a geyser blanket, but the savings that you'll have in electricity are going to be immense. Insulating the house is really important. I would do that before anything else. I think a lot of people think it's to keep the warmth in, but actually insulation is really effective at keeping your house cool in summer. So instead of you defaulting to an air conditioner or something like that, you can actually cool the inside of your house without having to use electrical energy. I think when people are starting to think about building a house, it's a wonderful place to be because you've got an absolute clean slate, and you can look at the lie of the land and make the best choices. And I think one of the things that I like to punt is the passive house. So using correct orientation and the correct materials for your climate to use the climate to make your house comfortable. And I think it harks back to the olden days. And I know that maybe that's an unpopular thought, but if you look at your Cape Dutch houses, they're immensely cool in summer. They're just a glorious place to be in. It's the choice of materials. It's the orientation of the building. And these are things to consider in our modern houses. They're not moot because we have moved on from maybe mud floors. So yeah, passive building structures is a very good way to start in your greenhouse design.
Yeah, and we'll talk a little bit more, about that, Alison, and even around if we look at different rooms in the house, what are some of the perhaps changes we can do in different parts? Because I think perhaps changes that you can do in the kitchen would be slightly different from changes perhaps in the bedrooms. I see we've got a comment here from Kirsten Carpenter from Facebook, on our Facebook page, who says, we have a use it up challenge when it comes to food. Nothing gets wasted. I actually love that one because I think it's so easy, and I know I'm guilty of this, and maybe it's also because oftentimes when you live alone, food, I think just buying for a household of one is very tricky. Cooking for one is very tricky. And even though I've been at it for a while, I still haven't quite found the sweet spot. So when you have family, I think it's easier. I want to say to people, it's actually easier to cook for like 3 people than it is for one person.
Oh, definitely.
Because even in terms of measurements and how long food is going to last you, maybe you don't want to be eating the same thing. Maybe you don't want to freeze it. So I certainly like that one because we shouldn't be wasting food as much as possible, rather buy less. Yeah.
But if things go off, maybe you can have a work farm.
Fortunately, I don't have a garden where I'm currently staying. Look, I'm going to be moving soon, thankfully, because I need a garden. I think that's one of the things I've realized, that in my life, I actually just need a garden. I've got green fingers. When I did have a garden, I had amazing kale, I had tomatoes, I was growing all sorts of herbs. And when I moved into this current place, I'm on the top floor and didn't have any of that. So I think now I know that, look, I actually just need a ground floor unit or just a property with a substantial bit of land. And thankfully, I'll be making that transition soon. So, Alison, I certainly want to then explore, if we're looking at different areas of the house, what are some of the other changes, and especially if you're looking at like your bedrooms or perhaps lounges, because I'm sure I'm just looking at my house and I'm thinking, look, I don't probably have the most greenhouse out there. I mean, luckily I've put in LED lights. When these ones went off, I actually bought LED lights. That's probably the only thing so far. I know we've got a normal geyser going in the sectional title scheme. They're looking at potentially putting in aircon, and I'm just against it. So, but what are some of those changes that we should maybe not even start implementing now, but just slowly be conscious of, so that when we're ready to make that next step, we're able to do so?
Well, let's start in the bedroom, because it's a good place to start. It is your refuge. And one of the things is it's got to be a calm, wonderful place. So if you're redecorating your bedroom, what you need to do is look for low VOC paints. Now, it sounds very gizmo, but basically that is the emissions that paints give off when they are curing. Low VOC paints, you can paint in the morning and move in the evening, and you will not have those headaches or any sort of respiratory reaction to the paints and the emissions. So I'm a big fan of using low VOC paints throughout your house, and obviously definitely in your bathroom. That's the thing. It's an easy way. Most of the major companies do offer the low VOC ranges. It used to be a lot harder to get, but now it's very available. The second thing is comfort. Your bedroom has to be a comfortable place. And one of the things is, with our summers, they are getting much hotter, is you need to be able to cool that room without using too much energy. So the things to consider is actually something called curtain management. It's a green management tool. You're using the shading of your curtains to keep your room cool in summer. So if you're at work and it's a hot day, keep your curtains closed throughout the day. That's a green step. You will use less energy to keep it cool, and it's a simple passive measure. But also, if you need to cool your room, consider a fan rather than an air conditioner. And I know that in South Africa, the fan technology is a little bit primitive, in my opinion. And I think a lot of people have blast or not at all as the options. And quite fans need to go really, really slowly to be effective. You don't want to feel a hurricane in your bedroom because you'll just dry out. But a gentle scooping of air is a wonderful way of creating a cooler environment in summer. If we want to go to the kitchen, that is another place to look at. I'm a fan of gas because I have gas in my house. But the problem with gas, even though it is a wonderful cooking medium, is it is still has carbon emissions.
Yeah.
If you are one of those lucky people that has solar on your roof and you can go off grid, then consider something called induction cooking. This is where your pot interacts magnetically with the stove, and 84 to 90% of the energy is converted into heat. Now, one of the great things about the induction cooker is if you move your pot off and you happen to touch the surface, it is cold to touch because it only works in the induction phase. So that is a very inexpensive and efficient way of cooking using electricity. And obviously, if it's solar electricity, then it's carbon free.
You know, Alison, I've actually never heard of induction cooking. I'm going to Google that and check out a few of the videos. It seems so fascinating. I'm certainly going to look that one up. When you were mentioning the tip for the bedroom in terms of, you know, not opening up your curtain, a part of me just thought, oh my goodness, I can already hear my mother being like walking into my place and like, why are your curtains, you know, closed? Why didn't you open your curtains in the morning?
These are the behavioral changes that we make.
Exactly, because we just get into the habit of first thing you do when you wake up, you open up your curtains everywhere.
Which is good.
Yeah, and surprisingly, I do close because I have a north-facing, you know, apartment. And when it does get quite hot sometimes and I'm still chilling, I'll probably open the sliding door but close the curtains because I just don't want that extra light and sunshine as well. And I do actually feel the difference. So I actually like that pro tip. I didn't realize that was a thing. I just did it because
it's a green thing.
But it certainly is a thing. And I think then, you know, Alison, perhaps some people at home are thinking, look, I can hear some of these, you know, tips and tricks, especially even when you look at something like, you know, closing your curtains, and maybe people are still not that convinced. You know, why would you say, you know, changes like these actually are significant? So to people who are probably still a little hesitant and still slightly skeptical of making those small changes, because I think one of the big things that we sometimes, you know, understand about environmental damage is, we know you more often than not, it's the big organizations that have the biggest impact. So sometimes as an individual, you're thinking, what's the point? Like, my one little change isn't going to make a difference to that grand scheme of how the environment is currently being affected.
Yeah, the saying goes, one swallow doesn't make a spring, but it does eventually. So every bit counts. If I were to follow that principle that my little bit didn't count, I would give up and go home and sleep instead of doing this. But I believe that my personal contribution, even as small as it is significant. And my interaction with my friends and family and encouraging them to do the same thing, that is a rolling ball. So a snowball effect. So our land is changing, our resources are becoming restricted. We want to still be comfortable as modern human beings, and we need to change little things in our habits to be able to accomplish that, but still preserve our resources. With the argument about carbon emissions is very real. The increase in anthropogenic carbon emissions has had a significant effect on our climate, and it will continue to have that because it is escalating. And guess what? Planet Earth will be just fine, but we won't be on it. So we're really doing this for the most of selfish reasons. We want to survive. We want to be comfortable. We want to be here. We don't have planet B. I mean, as much as Elon Musk is planning trips to Mars, it's not in anybody's conceivable lifetime. Yeah. So we need to make our environment as best for us, but for everybody else around us. It's very much a more collaborative approach. It's not just me doing my thing. It's me doing for other people. So it's a little bit of a shift in perspective, but I'm very enthusiastic about this approach.
And I think, I mean, look, if somebody can just turn down the temperature, it would help so much. I think our summers are excruciatingly hot. in Joburg, I can't stand anything above 27 degrees. I'm just like, there's no need to have anything above 27 degrees. If anything, it's actually one of the reasons I'm not interested in moving to Pretoria. I always say, I don't understand how people in Pretoria live because it's so hot. And as much as they'll say, oh, it's only 2 degrees hot, I'm like, no, it feels like it's 8 degrees hotter. So I've certainly, felt the difference. I mean, never mind whatever the arguments are, you feel the difference. We're experiencing it. We know that rainfall doesn't come when it's supposed to. It's not coming as often as it's supposed to come. Our seasons are just fundamentally messed up. One moment we think we're now in sort of spring. The next moment we're back into full-on winter. The next moment you have like a hailstorm. So it has actually gotten, quite significantly different as far as our environment is concerned. So every bit that we are able to do as individuals and collectively, because as much as you're doing it individually, we're actually doing it collectively, certainly makes a difference. We've got a comment here from Beacon Fitness saying new kitchen appliance trends as induction plates and air fryer. That's of course some of the tips that you're certainly able to use and start implementing in your own home. Now, Alison, before I let you go, any final tips for our viewers at home who are looking to go green in their various homes?
Well, I think everybody has solar energy as a solution for a green home. And I think it is certainly a wonderful place to go because it will give you some sort of independence from a very dodgy grid. But the one thing when you are planning to do your solar home is you need to strip out all your energy hungry appliances. You either need to replace them with much more efficient or get rid of them altogether, because there is only so much solar you can put on your roof. So you need to do an energy budget. And then once you've done your energy budget, you can then go ahead and do your solar installation. And I really wish everybody luck with that, because we want to see as many panels on roofs as possible.
Look, I think that's probably going to be my next project. I'm currently actually in the middle of a building project, so we'll see how we're able to incorporate that and probably go solar, because I haven't been happy with the power cuts. I think the moment summer comes, we think we're not as affected. Then we have power cuts in the middle of summer, which then obviously shocks us. So we really do want to find various ways of not just being eco-friendly, but also making sure that we still have energy. I think the reality of our grid is that currently it's unreliable, and it has been for the past decade, unfortunately. But Alison, we are going to leave it there this evening. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. It was lovely being here.
And that is Alison Groves, who's the Regional Director at WSP. Well, folks, that does bring us to the end of the Private Property Podcast. It certainly has been a pleasure being with you this evening. I do hope that you will be able to start thinking about the various ways that you can go green in your home, whether you are going green in a home that's already built right now, or of course, if you are building from scratch. As Alison has mentioned, I think one of the great things about building from scratch is that you have a blank canvas. So you're almost able to make sure that your house is as green as certainly as your budget also allows, because there are different interventions that you're able to do when you're building from scratch, depending the type of house that you're obviously building, and really working with great architects who understand how to build a green home is so important. So as we always say, work with the right professionals who've done this before, who'll share their portfolio of work with you, double check with their clients. So don't just go with the first person, vet them properly, because you also don't want to, spend money and find out that they didn't give you the best advice in terms of how to transform your home. Well, that's it from me, Zama. We're going to be back again, of course, tomorrow evening with the Friday edition of the Private Property Podcast. Until then, hoping you're staying home and staying safe.
Besides the beautiful beaches, sunny skies and how central everything is, what I really love about Umhlanga is the people. You can't help but become immersed in the culture, and you'll find people connecting in the most authentic spaces. It's just got this vibe to it. It's hard to think that only a few years ago, these business parks and homes were mostly sugarcane. The rate that this area has been developed at is truly mind-blowing. Especially with the fast pace of life these days, we really pride ourselves in being that bright spot in a person's day. You'll see everything from advocates and CEOs to creatives and students who pop into our spot for that short moment to escape. There's just so much life and energy in this area, and after a hectic week, there's nothing better than stopping in at Mount Edgecombe Country Club for a relaxed round of golf. The beauty and serenity that the estate offers really inspires me. There's honestly no place I'd rather live. That's my Umhlanga.